So today, E, we got a special guest in the building.
All righty.
Yeah, she's a best friend of my wife, and someone that I greatly admire. She's always doing a lot in the community, doing a lot with nonprofits. She's actually what's your title? Vice president, co-leader?
Vice president of trade.
All right, this is her name is Stephanie Amponsah. She currently resides in, are you still in Columbia?
No, right outside of Columbia, Hanover.
But Hanover, Maryland.
Yes.
She's on the East Coast.
Yes.
East Coast. But yeah, man, I thought it'd be good to bring Stephanie in just because, funny enough, I've kind of been on the periphery as her career has kind of taken off because I've been married to her friend for about that long, since we all got out of college, right? And so I thought it'd be good to bring her on to share some of her experiences in her career journey. Being that she's a Black woman as well, I thought it'd be great to kind of, educate us as men just kind of on that experience. And so we can learn something. And then just to kind of catch up and see how she's faring during this quarantine time too.
Yeah, when you said that she was a vice president, I said, anybody that can put that on a card.
Right.
We need to,
we need them.
Hear something. We got some stories coming. So.
We got some stories.
Welcome, Stephanie. We are so glad you're with us today.
Thank you. For having me.
So, normally with our guests, we like to kick it off, but just kind of getting to know you a little bit. Just your background, kind of, tell us where you grew up, your upbringing, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, once again, thanks for having me. I've had the pleasure of, I feel like, knowing Brian for almost ever. And I was excited to join because actually speaking with Danielle, like a couple of weeks ago, because we've been hiring and I've just been talking about the young Black girls that have been hiring, I feel like I'm extra hard on them, but also trying to figure out, I wish there was some place where young professionals can learn about being professional because there's not that platform. So appreciate you having me. But yeah, a little bit about me. So Ghanaian American. So my parents are originally from Ghana, but I was born and raised in Columbia, Maryland, which is a planned community right outside of DC in a suburb of Baltimore City. And yeah, I have 5 siblings and a twin sister. And yeah, we all grew up in Colombia, spent summers in Ghana, but very much grew up with a very bicultural lens. So it's like, you live in America, but your home is Ghana, right? So very, very different. Right. But no, when I think about my career, a lot of my upbringing, I think had to do with it. So my parents actually separated when we were very young, and my mom went from working in corporate America to coming from means, coming to another country to realizing I can't raise 5 kids and work in the corporate America. And so started cleaning houses when we were very young, and it very much became the family business, even though we didn't like it. But in hindsight, I realized how much that shaped kind of me and my career. And so my mom, for some reason, I don't know why, I was always the one to go with her to do consultations and negotiations. And so I learned early on about being a businesswoman and how you carry yourself. And my mom used to always take me with her to clean. And for her, she always just taught us humility and just taking pride in your work. So if you are gonna clean the toilet, you better be the best darn toilet cleaner ever, right? If you are gonna shine a faucet, you should see your reflection in the faucet. If you're gonna vacuum, make sure the lines are really, really clear. And so early on, just really learn how you take pride in your work and just that attention to detail and being confident. Here was a woman who came from a lot of means, but humbled herself and did what she had to do to raise her children. So learned a lot from her in terms of like how you carry yourself as a businesswoman, and how you always present yourself in the world of work, no matter what you're doing. So yeah, a lot of that brought me into kind of my career. Growing up in Columbia was great. It was a planned community, but a lot of that helped me in terms of like just with college. So I ran track in high school where I met Danielle Montgomery. And, I ran track because I wanted to stay in shape for soccer. Like, I was like, I'm going to be a professional soccer player. Like, that is going to be my career. Like, that was like the goal. And that did not happen. So my senior year, I wasn't going to run track, but my mom bribed me. She's like, okay, if you run track this year, I'll get you a new pair of shoes. And I was like, okay, sure. And so I ended up running track my last year, and my coach at the time, of blessed memory, got me a track scholarship. Like, I didn't know he was having scouts to come and see me run. Wow. And yeah, he was like, yep, got you a scholarship. And I was like, well, I don't want to run track. Like, I'm going to go to school in Florida. And at the time, like, it was going to be myself, my twin sister, and my older sister in college at the same time, and which would have been very expensive for my mom. Right. And I was like, well, I don't want to go. But my mom, being who she was like, you know what, I'm going to let you make this choice, which I don't know why she would let a 17-year-old do that. But she did. But I remember talking to my uncle, and he was saying, God gives us gifts, and right. How we use our gifts, is how we honor him in that. And for me, it just clicked right there. It's like, you know what, let me not be selfish. So I ended up going to High Point University on a full track ride, which was great. It was difficult. Being a student athlete is not easy. But in hindsight, I'm so glad I made that decision. Like, that's where, I got saved, joined a great church. And that's even how I got into my career, which I can go into that now, or we can talk about it later.
Well, talk a little bit, because you just kind of mentioned it, and just as a refresher, since it's been a while since we kind of been on, just kind of, bring our audience back up to speed. Here we have a philosophy that we use to kind of shape a lot of our conversations, and it's a 4-point philosophy called PIES. P is for look at this. It's been a minute, Eric. Look, P is for performance. I is for image. E is for exposure, which is basically the relationships you need to kind of succeed. And S is for spirituality. So talk a little bit about how your spirituality, and you said you got saved in college, so you found that source then, but talk a little bit about how that has kind of carried you through your career.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is the biggest source of, I think, really why I am doing what I am doing. Like, for me, like, I definitely feel like this is a work that I am called to do. And I think once you understand, like, your calling, and that, God has prepared a destiny for you, even when you do go through obstacles and challenges, you always go back to that place where you heard God, and, like, you remind God of his word, and like, this is what you call me to do. So you're going to give me, the ability, you're going to open doors for me. And so I think for me, like, and I'm very fortunate and blessed to like, I know the day I was called to do this work. And I remember, like, my freshman, sophomore year, like, just struggling, trying to figure out what was to be my, major. Like, I could not figure it out, kept bouncing back and forth. And it was actually through volunteering with my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, that I actually really came to, get into working in human relations. And I remember we were volunteering during the day with high school seniors, young girls, and then in the evenings we would volunteer teaching like elementary school at public housing how to read. And as I would, in the mornings, I noticed that a lot of the young girls very much didn't know who they were. They didn't really like have an idea about like what would life be like after high school. And then when I would go in the evenings, I noticed the same thing with the young girls, and you could see a trajectory of like what was going to happen. And many of these young girls we were working with who were seniors, maybe the first person they filmed to graduate high school, first person to go off to college. And for me, that was also a very foreign concept where, as, immigrants, like you're also taught like education, like that's what you do.
Right.
Also growing up in a very planned community where it was very diverse in social economic status, like it was planned to, provide economic opportunity for everyone. So coming to an area where you finally realize that, okay, America is not the place of opportunity. And it is very much tied to your zip code, and particularly for people of color. And it was a very foreign concept to me to like realize like, wow, like access and opportunity is not equal in this country. And it just hit me like, I'm very much, there's no difference between myself and these young people. It's just where I grew up, right? And what if my mom would have, what if they would have moved to, another part of the town where we didn't have the same access?
Right.
And then also realizing too, like immigrant, single mother, Black, female, like for so many reasons, like should not have been where I was. And
Right.
it just hit me like a ton of bricks of like, you know what, like if I'm going to do anything in life, like it is going to be like providing opportunity and access for young people, because there's no reason I should have it. And I really felt like this is what God was calling me to do. So I immediately changed my major to human relations, concentration in business and nonprofit organizations, my junior year.
That's pretty cool. So human relations, I know Eric here has a ton of, when I say a ton, I mean, he likes to say, what's your saying about your birthdays?
I was around when Eisenhower was president. So, I hear people talk about, Kennedy, I studied about him in history class. Shut up. I was on the bus when he got shot. So,
see, there you go. But I feel like, I mean, just even in the names, I feel like there's a connection between human relations and human resources. And Eric has a ton of experience, 30 plus years of kind of running human resource departments and training teams and such. So I'll let him kind of speak to that a little bit.
Kind of what I hear you saying, I love the realization that, and some of us don't have it, that were born in this country, that if you have certain advantages and certain blessings, it's an advantage that you have because you were in proximity of folks that had that. Even as we do the virus, the places that we live are not terribly oppressive. And yeah, we're hunkered down, but I mean, I walk around a lake every morning in the neighborhood and we just go, oh, good morning. And we don't get close, but I understand also, I got a nephew in New York City, and we looked at him on Zoom the other week. He looked like Childish Gambino. Everything here is room all the way out. He's a good looking dude. I said, man, when you been outside? He's like, I have never been outside. So understanding that many of us are blessed, and we should take that as a mandate to go do something for other people. And that's what I hear. You said something about this. Do me a favor, go back just a little bit. How do you see your calling or your purpose driving what you do today?
I mean, I think for me, like a lot of it has to do with, I think about what we do now. So what we do, previous to where I am now, I worked as an executive director for 5 years at a nonprofit, and our role was to work with high school seniors at a critical point in their life to expose them to the world of work through mentorship, post-high school planning, and really just building capital, right? Social capital, financial capital, and it was not easy. And I think for me, had I not known that I was called to the work, it would have been really difficult. And mainly because, before even getting the job, like I was working as a social worker in Southeast DC, and it was great. I liked it, but I didn't feel like I was making that impact that I wanted to. And, through volunteering, again, connected with, Urban Alliance, where I was working as a program director, and I actually had to take it was a pay cut, it was a step back, and in hindsight, like it wouldn't have made sense for me to do it, but I also felt like I was saying like, no, like I know this doesn't seemingly look like, what you work for, but this is what I'm calling you to do. And it was really difficult because taking that pay cut was not easy. And being at the age that I was like, it was almost like I was starting all over, but it was good in that it propelled me way further than I would have been able to get. And that I served as more of a case manager for 2 years, and then program director for 2 years. And after that, I kind of felt too, I was like, I don't know, but I'm good at this, I'm comfortable. And an opportunity for executive director position came up, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, I'm just trying to help people. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
comfortable. And I was like, I don't want to raise money. I was like, this is $1 million organization. And it hit me like, you know what, Stephanie, fear. Like, that's what it was like. Your issue is fear and comfort. Like, yes, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, but you don't want to do it because you're scared. But then having to go back to a place of like, no, like, this is where God called you. And I'm so glad I did it. And I'm so glad too. Another point I always say, it's so important, like the people that you have in your life, iron sharpens iron. And it would have been real easy for me to just be comfortable because like, it was fine. Like, it wasn't like being a program director was bad, but I knew God was calling me something higher, but I was fearful. And so I think understanding who you are and like, it has less to do with like titles and more to do with impact. And I always tell you, like, don't chase a title, chase impact. Like, what impact do you want to have on the world, right? Not necessarily a title, because your gifts and your talents will open way more doors for you than just being, the vice president, executive director. Like, that's fine, but like, what impact are you making? So.
And I feel like, man, you said so much there in like a 5-second bite, man. Just talking about, even your circle, right? Like having that circle, because you said iron sharpens iron, and then not chasing the titles. I feel like that's something that we constantly talk about here because, oftentimes, man, and I say we as minorities and Black people especially, when we're coming out of college, we're looking for the title because that's kind of what we've been taught brings us a level of respect and money.
Yes.
Right. And we kind of skip a lot of the skill building. Right.
Yes.
And I learned early on, I was so fortunate to have had a Black woman as a manager my first job out of college. And she saw something within myself, how hungry I was, and that she said, look, you won't get the promotions just because it's really, that's more of a corporate political function. She was like, but if you do as much as you can, learn as much as you can, she's like, trust me, the money will come.
Yes.
She told me that probably like after 4 months of working for her. And it's like, I've kind of carried that with me for my whole career. And, I joke around on this show a lot where I talk about, my little career journey. I've technically been at the same company for going on 14 years, 15 years almost. But the joke is I've been trying to leave for 13. Right? I've been trying to leave for 13, but every time I try to leave, another opportunity within the organization opens up. And that's a testament to the skills and the relationships that I've built there. Eric, you had something?
Yeah, you guys are spot on with why God allows you to go through things. There's a learning, there's a training. You go to the gym and work out. Now you're a track star, so what you had to do, getting up in the morning. What was your event, by the way?
The 2 and the open 400.
Okay. See, that's heart attack for
yes.
That ain't happening.
Right.
Feel the Charlie horse. I can still feel the Charlie horse.
It's like, again, another lap. Again. But I want you to think about what you had to do to train to get there. It was painful. It didn't feel good. Sitting down and having a big sandwich and some food would be a more pleasurable experience than what you did. But as you saw your times get better and better and better, and you saw yourself becoming more competitive,
right,
the end result was you look back on the training and went, yeah, it was worth it. I'm better. I believe God, in the book, it gives you so many examples, but he carries you through that. And when you're younger and first starting, we did miseducate you. Now there's a book out, it's been out since the 30s or whatever, The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. And it's one of the things that says we, even in our educational system, have been educated to do to fit into the man's system.
Yeah.
Never educated for emotional development and achievement.
Mm-hmm.
That's why business majors can come out of school with business and can't start businesses. They're not equipped to start a business and be entrepreneurs, but they got a business degree. They got an MBA.
Yeah.
Still couldn't start a business.
Yeah.
So you said something about calling, which I just thoroughly love. It. What was your major in college, by the way?
Yeah, so human relations with a concentration in nonprofit organizations and business.
Yep.
And then I did a master's in public administration and nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, yeah. But I like what you both are saying, and particularly around like, and this is one thing I try and tell young people is like, a lot of time people stay at a job for 2 to 3 years, then they're out. And it's so important that you like build your skills. You have to understand the seasons and cadence of work, right? The first year you get like a job, you're just learning, right? You're just trying to figure it out. The second year, like, oh, okay, like I remember what happened last year, like I can apply that. Third year, oh, now I can start adding like, you know, little here and there, I can experiment on things. Fourth year, you have more of a rhythm. Fifth year, like, okay, I think I know what I can start mentoring, and maybe I start looking outside, or maybe I look for roles within the organization. But young people don't stay at a job long enough to realize that. And like having to understand, like, you know, it's just like steps. You like one step at a time. Like you don't just get straight to the top, right? And so I think a lot of times like forget like you need to build the skills. And I see it a lot when like I'm hiring, like maybe a young person is just out of college and they want to be a program director. And I'm just like, you
what are your skills?
Yeah, like you have skills. Like, what are you offering? Or I want to make, you know, $80,000, and I'm like, did you look at our budget? Like, did you work? And I am all for like, yeah, you want to make your money, you want to have like those goals. I am all for that, but particularly in the human service field too, you also have to realize like we are working on the path of young people, very vulnerable. Young people, and it's disrespectful to come and say like I want to run thing when you don't know anything. And so it's always like give a job at least like for at least 4 years to really learn like the skill set, because you don't know what you don't know.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right too in terms of just like the progression of building your skills, right? So like even with my job, right? I started there 2006, 7, but I've held 6 positions in those years. I haven't just been in the same position and not moved. And
that's awesome, bro.
6 positions in what 13, 14 years, right? So my lesson to people, and when I say that is, I don't really tell people to just, stick it out with where you are. Matter of fact, Eric will tell you, we never say that on the show. We're always evaluating what's your next step. Is it time to go? Is it time to look for something else within the organization or whatever? But my point is, every time that I've started a new position within the organization, just like you just said, it's taken about 2 years, 2.5 to really get to the point where I've grasped everything and I've kind of attained those new skills. That first year, man, it's just like coming right out of college again.
Yes.
I'm trying to learn this business, even though I know accounting, right? I'm trying to learn the business. I'm trying to figure out the best way to account for it. The rules might be different here. I got to go do research here. I'm a newbie all over again.
Yes, exactly.
By 2 years in, then I'm like, okay, I have a solid foundation. I'm probably good enough to kind of package these skills up and do something else with. Then I'll start. But I'm not coming in right off the bat just because I have X years of experience and say, hey, I'm trying to run this thing.
Right, exactly. And I like what you're saying too, because I think also one thing I had to learn, like even though I was in the same organization, I went from case manager, program director, executive director. Those are totally different skill sets that, you need, like, the grit, all that got you there, but like also understanding like, okay, like, how do I now function in this new same organization, but new role, right? And so like that professional development piece is so critical. Like,
let's speak to this real quick, because I think all 3 of us here are in positions of leadership at our respective places, right? So I want you, especially you two, I want you two to speak to just the things that you've learned at every level that I want to say most people who are looking to get to positions of management, for example, right, may not understand is a skill set that's needed. And so where you were as a caseworker, totally different skill set than you needed when you were going up and you're starting to enter into management. Because now, yes, you still need your caseworker skills, but now
Yes.
you have people to manage. You have relationships above you, and even
Yes.
higher to manage even more closely. So, Stephanie, you speak to that first, and then Eric.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think like the biggest thing too is just people need to be like social emotional intelligence. And I know
Mm,
like that's a big like kind of buzzword, but it is so critical like to understand yourself, understand your surroundings, understand the people that you're working with. But the biggest thing like or difference I saw like becoming executive director and being now vice president is you have to have a vision, right? For like
mm,
where you're going. I mean, the word God talks about like people perish for a lack of it. Like you have to know where you're going, right?
right,
And you
right,
need to have
right.
like the knowledge and the skills. So I think that was the biggest piece. And then culture. Like I focus really, really, really like I zeroed in on culture and relationships. Like that was the main thing I kind of focused on like when I first started. And mainly because the work does require like culture and relationships. So being
Hmm.
really intentional about like sitting down, knowing the team, like what, what's your love language, right? Like what makes you tick? What makes you happy? Like what
Yeah,
are your skill sets? Where can I see you going? Like where are your kind of weaknesses? Where are your
right.
strengths? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think like understanding your team and like building a culture where we can be open and direct. Even if I am the director, like push back. Like we're all human, we all have thoughts, right?
Right.
And also understanding like your leadership style, right? Like I know I'm very much a servant leader. So how does that play well in this setting? And how does that not play well in this setting?
Right.
So I think
Right.
understanding like your leadership, having a vision, and then like culture is huge, particularly when you're working with the younger population too, like where the workplace is just different. And so like, yeah, at staff meeting, we're going to stop and we're just going to talk about highs and lows, right? Like we're just going to talk about you, right? Or we're going to
Right.
have brown bag lunch, once a week where we all sit and we get to know each other, right? Because we spend a lot of time with each other. So really wanting to create a culture where people want to come to work, and a culture where like if you feel like, I really feel like I want to go into a different career, then you don't have to hide to do a phone interview. Like, just tell me, like, I will work with you,
Right.
to
Right.
move you forward, because it's like just creating a culture where we care about you, the person. But I think the biggest piece is like, you got to have a vision for where you're going and where you're taking your team. I think that's so critical.
And is being able to, this is a question for the both of you, and I'll go to Eric first. Is being able to craft a vision, is that a skill in the sense is it something that can be developed?
That's a good
All
question.
of this can be developed because we can all learn whatever that is that's critical to what we do. Now, she
Right.
said something about emotional intelligence that just got me. Right now, and I'm doing some executive coaching as we speak. The parts that are troublesome for a couple of clients that I have are never the performance parts of their jobs.
Oh no, that's where we're comfortable.
It's never the
Mm-hmm.
performance job. And I don't want to give wrong attribution for this, but if you Google it, there's a concept out, and I can see the guy's name, psychologist, the writer and the elephant in emotional intelligence.
Oh,
The
yes.
writer, the
Yeah.
writer is the intellect, it's the logic chip. But
Yeah.
the elephant, this big giant thing, is the emotions. So
Yes.
if I work for you, you can give me logic. Well, Eric, if you do a good job, you get bonuses and raises and be able to take care of your family, yada, yada. That's
Mm-hmm.
the intelligent part.
Right.
The elephant part is huge. If you
Yes.
piss me off and I hate you, I ignore the writer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when the elephant goes on stampede, he kills everybody. So what people miss
Uh-huh.
Yes.
is that we are creatures of emotion. I come
Yes.
to
Right.
work. One person that I'm coaching now, they had a bunch of staffers with their senior team. They are brilliant. However, they didn't understand when you walk into a room, and I think a lot of us miss, I got a couple of questions for you, Stephanie, as a Black woman walking into one of those power rooms. I'll come back to that.
Yes, yeah.
But when you walk into a room, your antenna needs to be out before you talk. Okay, what's going on in this room? Who is that? And if you have been blessed to build a relationship with any of those people before you walk in, now you've got something to draw on. But when you walk in a room cold, you should be like a submarine, not knowing who's in the ocean in front of you. Let me get my radar out. Let me feel the room. Let me be observant. It is a dance.
Right.
And I see you nodding because I know, first of all, you got VP behind your name. So in order to get in there, I know you know the dance.
Yeah.
That's what we're missing. And that's what folks that, you know, have deep tans, there's nobody here to teach us because I don't know enough VPs who have done the dance and can now lead me through the steps.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
That's critical.
No, that's so real. And I love, that's funny. Like I went to a conference and it's like, my notes are right here about the elephant and the ride, like learn about adaptive change. No, like you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T.
Yes.
That's his name.
That was it. I gave the credit to Simon Sinek, but Simon Sinek had used it in one of his presentations. But all of us need to do that. And smart people, if you miss emotional intelligence, you don't get any reward for being smart.
Right.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. You don't. You don't.
Especially minorities.
No.
I'll share this, and then I will move to the next part where we kind of dig a little more into your career journey. We've kind of touched on it here and there, but I think I want to dig in just a tad more. But something that I started researching a few months ago, and it's been around for centuries, but you've heard of the term stoicism, right?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. So modern stoicism kind of focuses on, well, stoicism in general, but modern stoicism really focuses on trying to live a life where you have as few negative emotions control you as possible, right? And so you think about that, there are many of us that when we feel annoyed, when we feel anger, when we feel frustrated, it can become so easy to let those emotions derail us, even if for an hour. If it throws us off our game, we've now lost an hour of something that we could have been spending more positive energy on, right? And so something that I've been working on just in my own personal workspace, personal life, and everything is, once I feel that negative emotion come up, it's almost like an immediate thing. Do I need to address you right now? Do I need to give you power right now? If not, you can go ahead and take a back seat and walk out the door. And I'm going to focus on a different positive emotion, right? And it is not the easiest thing in the world. But what that allows is it teaches you patience, right? Teaches you patience to work with people who people who may drive you to do things that you probably don't want to do, you might go to jail for. And so, right? but it also teaches you patience in your personal relationships and even with yourself, right? But it's like it's just that whole concept that I find interesting, because you're talking about emotional intelligence, and I think that's a piece of it, like learning that patience.
Yes.
I got to
go ahead.
I got to do one faith thing. What helps me in that moment, and this is my own personal journey, so people of faith out there, you'll get it.
Yep.
I wake up in the morning and I ask for wisdom, guidance, and direction, because I am stupid. I know that. I'm not trying to front. I'm a ball of messed up stuff. However, when I'm connected, the stuff that he allows to flow through me is absolutely awesome. He gets all credit for that, but I know that there's nothing good inside of me. So if I start that way in the morning and somebody walks in the room and they say something stupid, we're human. I go to the faith switch. I say, okay, God, please keep me out the penitentiary today. That's my next thought.
Right.
Give me some calmness over my emotions before I slap this fool into next week.
Right.
I don't need to go to jail. This is quiet. Now this person doesn't see it, so it may look stoic, They don't know an angel just saved their life.
Right.
Yeah. But you know my thing too, and I say this frequently, just in my personal conversations and on here.
Yeah.
There are so many belief systems
Yeah.
that are built on very, very, very common tenets
Yeah.
and principles
Yeah.
with few differences. But we focus so much on the differences that it separates us versus brings us together.
Exactly.
So yeah, let's dig into this career journey a little bit. I think we touched on it. You said you started off kind of doing social work, and then you kind of started to progress up the chain. So if you could just briefly walk us through like the various positions you held before you got to where you are now.
Yeah, definitely. So, so started out social work for 2 years, foster care in North Carolina. Did that while I was in grad school for 2 years. And then I knew I wanted to come back to the DC area just because my family was here. And I actually like had such a difficult time finding work when I came back. I was like, oh, I got my grad degree, I'm gonna find work. And I remember like a month or 2 months after I've been home, like still interviewing, finally found a job, got a job in Texas. And I was like really excited because it was a program director role. And like I was, had the signature, everything was going to move. And 2 weeks later, they called like, unfortunately, we had some budget cuts issues, so we're not going to give you the job. And I was like, what? Like I was devastated. And I was like, God, like what is happening? Like this is supposed to be my job. And so it took probably another like 6 months. And I did not want to do social work. Like that was the one thing I was not trying to do. I was like, Lord, I don't want to do this again. But I really just felt like God was calling me to that again. So worked as a social worker for about 3 years in Southeast DC. And I loved it. It was great. I think, again, like I was saying before, the challenge was it was a lot of bureaucracy, it was a lot of red tape. And, kids were aging out of the system, getting homeless. And I was just like, this is just not a way, this is not what I'm supposed, like, there has to be more to this. And I remember my director saying to me, well, your raise definitely depends on like how many kids you keep in this house. And I was just like, well, I was like, the child is trying to commit suicide. Like, I don't think they should be here. So it was a lot of like tension, it was a lot of challenge. Like, but from there, I also really learned of like how you work with a management who has separate like intentions and visions. And so it was good. And that I was able to really learn how to have difficult conversations, but being respectful, right? And so in hindsight, it was good that I went through that. And, I was very young, but I was also managing people who were older than me. So learning how to communicate. So while it was a difficult job, I learned a lot of skills. And, after 3 years, I was like, I think it's time to transition. And I really wanted to just really focus more on counseling. So I was like, I'm gonna go back to school. But it was not a good decision in that it wasn't necessarily a prayerful decision. It was more of like, I'm burnt out. I want to do something different. This sounds good. It's still in the same lane. And so, but, God being so good, it still worked out because through my nonprofit that I had started with two of my sorority sisters, I had been volunteering. We had started an organization called Instilling Values in You, where we work with young girls and men around like character development, and had lots of workshops. Brian I remember you were on our panel.
I do.
With young men.
I do.
It was great. And I wanted to stay in that lane of working with young people. And again, through volunteer work, fell upon Urban Alliance. And that's what I was talking about before. Like, it was a great job, but it was definitely like a pay cut, like everything cut. But again, I really just felt like this was good. So the first day I started there is my first day of grad school. And for some reason, I decided I was going to go to grad school full time and work full time. Probably not the smartest thing. But, I did it, and I was like, I'll be at Urban Alliance for 2 years. So I'm going to be a counselor and keep it moving. But maybe a year or 2 years, 2 years into the program, I loved it. It was great. But I really also loved Urban Alliance and the work that we were doing. And so got promoted to program director. But one thing I always did is I always worked the next job. So even though I wasn't necessarily trying to, like, I knew I was going to just be gone for 2 years, like I worked as if I was the program director when I was
good.
case manager. And I always tell like young people, like, work the job like you own it, and, you know, put your name on it. And so, yeah, after 4 years being at Urban Alliance, they were like, hey, you know, we have an opening for executive director. And I was like, you know, again, don't think I want to do that. I'm fine. You know, I'm humble. I don't want to be, you know, face of the organization, all of that. But realized it was just false humility. Like I said, it was just fear. And so, you know, through my mom forcing me and calling my whole family and forcing me to do it as well, um, I did it, and it was good. It was a great experience, but it was challenging. It was not easy. Like, I walked into a $300,000 deficit
Yeah.
for $1 million organization,
Yeah.
but you know, by God's grace, I was able to like really be successful. We went from serving, you know, 40 kids in 2 schools, and by the time I left, we had served about over 1,000 kids in 20 schools. We had went citywide. We had started 4 new programs for young people, and our young people were graduating high school at higher rates than the city, and it was amazing. And I got an offer to serve as, it was a new role they were positioning for me at the organization at our national office in DC. And I felt like, oh, well, this is good. It sounds good. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I was kind of burnt out. But then I was like, well, no, like, you know, being, you know, vice president of this organization is great. I've been here 9 years. I know the people, I'm comfortable,
Right.
and, you know, it's going to be a pay increase. But then I realized that I was just comfortable. Like, I was so scared to now like step out into something new, because like I had started at the organization at 27, and now here I am, you know, at 36, and you just get comfortable. Like, and it wasn't that it was a bad thing to like go into this position, because I knew the board, I knew the people, I knew the players, but I also knew I needed to challenge myself, because after being there for 9 years, people also get familiar with you. And I just knew I needed to stretch myself, and I was super scared. And so even though I knew I needed to leave by year 8, I stayed. And thankfully, just through, again, like people you have in your life who like challenge you and stretch you to do
Mm-hmm.
more.
Yeah.
Um, and mentorship. I always tell people, get a mentor. But I had been in conversation with my mentor who had originally hired me at Urban Alliance when I was 27, and she was helping me just think through what would be my next steps. Um,
Awesome.
and it was really difficult also, because like here I am, like the organization is like in a really good place, and I felt like if I left, then like it would be like it wouldn't be the same. But realizing that like there's seasons and times for everything, and like you were in that place for that season and that time, and now it was time to move, you know, move on. And that also, I felt like my identity was getting tapped up in being Stephanie, the executive director, right? And not realizing that, well, maybe God has more for you to do, and just always going back to like, it's not about you, it's about the impact. So
Right.
long story short, just in conversation with my executive director, the previous executive director who had served as my mentor, she had been working with another organization who was starting to do some new work in Baltimore City. And I just loved the approach, because it was a very much a holistic approach to, you know, working with young people on breaking intergenerational poverty, right? So how do you address poverty through education, through housing,
Mm.
through community health and wellness? And so when I saw the model, I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, look, Stephanie, I'm going to start this organization. I need a number 2, and I'd love for you to like join me on this journey. And so it was great. I started with her back in November. But I will say, at first I told her no. And mainly because I don't really know why I said no. I just kind of felt like, well, I don't want to work for a nonprofit. Like, I want to go do corporate social responsibility. It's the same thing. I'm tired of like raising money.
Right.
You know, small organizations can be really, really difficult. And simultaneously, I had potential offer in New York and another offer with another larger company. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to get those jobs. I ended up not getting them, which was fine. And one wanted me to move to New York, and it just didn't fit. And so I went back to my mentor and I was just like, you know what? I really feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, I really feel like, because I said my next job, I'm not going to have to interview for. I'm going to be able to easily slip in. I'll be able to use, leverage the networks I've worked for. And when I kind of looked at everything I had prayed about, like, it hit all of those things.
Mm.
So now just serving as a vice president of Dream Big, where for us, we're really focusing on, how do you provide opportunity for young people and put them on a path of economic success, and provide choice through education and housing, as well as community wellness.
Nice.
That's
I
awesome.
love this.
That's awesome.
Let's now let's dig into a little bit of this nitty gritty, man.
Yes.
Um, being a woman,
Yes.
black woman, who's held various corporate roles, right? I don't even know where to start, but let's even talk about just the challenges of getting to the next position. Like, what are some obstacles that you face? Because like I know that just as people of color in general, like we walk into the room and there's a whole different kind of math that we have to do before just about any other race, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
being a black woman, I know my wife talks about this a lot. She educates me as well, just on just the nuances that I won't ever be able to experience,
Mhm.
just because I'm a guy. You know what I
Right.
mean? But
Right.
yeah, talk about your perspective and some of your experiences there.
I feel like for me, like the challenge is like I struggle like early on with like, I didn't want to feed into like being the angry black woman,
Mm,
being too emotional, um, not being or like asserting yourself too much. Like I struggled very early on with like people's perception of me as a black woman,
mm-hmm.
and what all that comes with. And so very like, particularly when I came in as like a director, like it was heightened to the point where like I was, black tax, I was doing way more than I probably should have, but
Right.
like I was always trying to like prove. It made me so self-conscious because I was trying to like prove that yes, I'm black, I'm young, but like I'm also smart, and like I'm not just a black face, like so it's like always trying to like, I was
Yeah.
always fighting the stereotypes and the perceptions, and it was really difficult. And I'll be like honest, I'll never forget, I had a meeting and I was supposed to meet with the general manager, and then she had some last minute, challenges. So met with some of her C-suite folks. And so I remember getting there, and my colleague, white woman, was joining me, and she was a little late. So I'm sitting there with the C-suite folks, and, we're just talking, making small talk. I was like, oh, and my colleagues, she's coming, she's on her way. So she gets there, and she sits down. I was like, oh, it's my colleague. And they were like, oh, okay, nice to meet you, making some small talk. So then we were like, let's start the meeting. So immediately they all turned their body language towards my white colleague. And I'm like, and I've experienced microaggression, all of that before, but this was just a
Yeah.
very blatant, like, oh, like you possibly can't be the one like in charge. Like it must be her. And so I had to quickly redirect of like, no, I'm running, this, like I'm the executive, like I'm running the meeting, right? So you deal with things like that, which it weighs heavy on your mind, and it
Yeah.
makes you very self-conscious and very worried. But it came to a point where I was just like, I had to realize, like, you know what, Stephanie, you are going to drive yourself crazy by always trying to get ahead of people's perceptions of you as a black woman.
Right.
And I had to go back to the whole thing of like, God called you to this work, like, that, right? And so no matter like what they perceive you to be or not to be or not to have, like it's going to succeed, like everything's going to work out. And so I had to really just start to train my mind of like, regardless of like their perception of how they think of me, like I'm going to focus on results I'm going to
Right.
focus on doing, being a value add to this organization.
Right.
And I'm also going to focus on, I had to just shift my focus from like what people were perceiving me as to like, what are the young Black people perceiving me as, right? And
Mm.
like, it is so important for them to see a person of color in this role because they've never seen that before. Because I remember a young man coming to my office and he was like, oh, like this is your office, like you're the director, like, and it was such a like, foreign concept, and realizing like,
Yeah.
you know what, it's important that they see what they can be.
Right.
And starting to really change of like making it like more of an asset. Because my mom used to always tell me like, you're African, we're resourceful people, you can do anything you want to do, right? And so really coming
Right.
from looking at being a Black female as an asset, like I bring so much to the picture because I am a Black female, rather than looking at it as a deficit. And when I changed that perception, it helped me to be more confident when I walked into a room, rather than shrinking back because of like, what are they going to think? What are they going to think of me? Like, you have that imposter syndrome of like, am I supposed to be here? They're going to
Oh,
find
of
out,
course.
I'm not smart enough. I'm not
Of
supposed to
course.
be here. And so so for me, like, I just had to take that, instead of getting angry about like people's microaggressions, like
Right.
I had to take that
Right.
power back, right? And
Right.
start using it in a way that was starting to like uplift the young people that I'm trying to serve, who are mostly people of color, and also taking pride in like, in the nonprofit world, like you don't see a lot of people, Black females, in like running nonprofit organizations. It's
Right.
typically, white women. And so also beginning to look at that as like, you know what, Stephanie, like let's use, like, how are we going to use this platform, for better? And so, yeah, I think that it's challenging because people also like, oh, they automatically assume like you must be from this part of the town, and
Yeah.
everyone likes a good story, and I'm like, no, actually I'm not. Like, I went to this school, I did
Right. Right.
so it's difficult to deal with people's like perceptions of you as a Black woman, but like I had to
Yeah. You know,
quickly change.
I noticed I try to be a very observant person as much as I can. I noticed, like, I think I've told the story before. I know I've told you, E, but there was a mentee of mine at work. I try and get in the ear of all the young Black professionals that I come across in my in my job. I'm kind of like the OG over there, so it's
Sure.
just like, hey, like the moment I'm introduced to them, it's just like, hey, come here, let me talk to you. I just kind of gauge like, cool, how's it going? What are your career aspirations? All right, then after like by the third conversation, I'm kind of okay. Take the temperature, look around.
Mhm.
What do you see?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a challenge, but don't let it discourage you, right?
Yes,
So
that's good
I had
advice.
I had a mentee once, um, very very intelligent young lady. She was, I mean, she was just like many of us, right? You come out of college, you have a perception of what you need to do to be successful and to get up the ladder, and many of us are not taught
Yes.
what it takes to do. I myself didn't learn it until this guy, Eric, became my mentor and he starts giving me all the pies tips. And I'm just like, now it makes sense, right? And so I'm passing this knowledge along. And one day I had gotten comfortable enough where I was like, okay, cool. Look, I'm going to tell you this. And this is not coming from a place of judgment. This is not coming from a place of like a creepy guy, like trying to tell you what to do. I was like, we got to work on the wardrobe. And she was like, well, what's wrong with the? I was like, look, man, and practically what it was there was really nothing wrong with it. It's just parts of us, we have to play the game
Can't do
enough to get the respect that we need. And one day we just walked around the floor. I said, let's walk around the floor. I said, I want you to pick out all the women that are in leadership positions, right? And once we walked around the floor, she came back and I was like, how many people of color did we see in leadership positions? Out of about 8 women, it was 2. I said, okay, out of those 2, you tell me how they presented themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And essentially what it boils down to is a lot of the white women in the organization, excuse me, they come in regular ponytail, minimal makeup, a plain blouse and some dress pants or whatever, sometimes in jeans.
Utilitarian is the print. Utilitarian is the phrase.
Exactly. While my sister that I was mentoring, she's dressed to the nines, like she's stepping out high fashion. And I was like, tone it down. Crazy enough. 6 months later, after she took that advice, 6 months later, she started getting more opportunities within the organization. But my point to that was I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's just a different set of rules
Yeah.
for black people, but black women specifically. You guys are judged way harsher. I talk about this a lot with friends, but it's the privilege hierarchy, right? White, they're at the top of the privilege chain, right? But then in that, white men have more privilege than white women. White women have more privilege than black people. In the black privilege hierarchy, black men have more privilege than black women. You feel what I'm saying?
True.
But what I'm trying to work on, and what I'm encouraging others to do is, how can we challenge those privileges? So if a white woman has more privilege than me as a black man, how can I challenge her privilege to be aware, right, and to use her privilege for good and not necessarily for evil?
Yes.
And that goes for black men too, right? How can we as black men use the privilege that we have to make sure that we're uplifting our black women within the organizations and such?
That's good.
How you manage your resentment. And I heard you mention your faith, God's leading purpose. God's leading purpose. Stephanie, I just hear it through everything that you're talking about. I'm going this direction, God leading purpose. Boom. None of us have time to resent racism and the roadblocks in front of us. First of all, if you do that, you're destroyed.
Come on.
And I see a lot of people complaining about that so much that they are incapacitated. Okay, but you lost. That's the fact. I'm really just tall. My afro's not coming back. It is what it is. Now, what am I going to do? And my thing, and I get, and Brian knows, we talk about it. I'll do a seminar where people say, "Man, you're callous." No, it's reality. If God has allowed me to still breathe, what am I going to do today? And it doesn't matter who doesn't like you. Now, to your point, I'm watching you. It doesn't matter what those people thought about you. You're still sitting in the same chair that God put you in, fulfilling your purpose. So to stop and be resentful of that, and I don't say it's not wrong. Somebody says, is racism wrong? Of course it's wrong. Right. But I've worked in different countries, and I've seen people that to me look like the same race, and they were in different tribes, different regions, different whatever. And I saw the same negative behavior. I couldn't just blame it on black and white. I'm like, dude, I was working in one country in the motherland, and these two guys couldn't get along. So I'm in this meeting, and the lawyer lady walks in. She's, African sister, and she laughed. She said, "You're trying to get them to work together." And I said, "Yes." I said, "If you do that, you don't have the Americans coming over getting all in your business." She said, "They would never do that." I said, "Why?" Different tribes.
Different tribes.
So I did this one thing. She looked at me, just shook her. I said, "They all look alike to me." She just walked out of the room.
A real thing.
It's exactly it.
Yeah.
So I've seen the Serbs and the Bosnians. I've seen the Irish and the British kill each other or whatever. And it is basically man's inhumanity to man. Now, in this country, it's black and white.
Correct.
Because you don't have to be intelligent to be prejudiced against color. Just blunt. I still got to accomplish, and God still wants us to be accomplished, successful, wealthy. He wants that good for us. And if we spend time being resentful, which I'm hearing you say, I ain't got time for that.
Yeah, basically.
Right.
You summed it up. And then I also tell you, I'm working with very vulnerable young people who are dealing with like real life situations. I don't have time to be thinking about who doesn't like me because I'm Black. Like, you literally have like kids who are dying, like, you know, like struggling. Like, you got to get over yourself. It's not about you.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true.
All right. We got a few minutes left. Let's talk about the aspect of hiring once you get into leadership roles and just the various stories that come along with that particular process, right? And what I want you to do as you're speaking on the experience is share a couple of tips for the listeners, all right? Especially in this time of quarantine where everything's remote. And to be honest, just the way things are looking, it's remote is going to be the norm for a while until they can figure out vaccines and such. But
Yeah.
I want you to kind of talk about some of your hiring experiences and just some different tips that you can share with people as they're going through the process.
Definitely. So I always like my motto when I'm hiring, I do like hire slow, fire fast. Right? That is like my motto. And I say hire slow because like just being intentional, right? About like what are the gaps and what are you trying to fill, right? Because like for instance, like I'm trying to fill for culture, for skill, and teachable. I really always look for people who are teachable. If I'm in an interview and it's all about that is a huge red flag for me, because the work we do is very team oriented. I don't care if you're the board chair or the post manager, like if it's time to clean up, we all clean it up, we all taking out trash, right? So you have to come with like a, you know, spirit of humility. But one thing like I just feel and I see is lacking, particularly with young like minorities, it's the little soft skills, things, a little professionalism. So it's the, you know, from jump, if you're sending your cover letter and resume, put it in a PDF. Don't put it in Word.
Word. Yep.
If you are applying for a case manager position, don't put Stephanie Amponsah, human relations, or you know, or HR job. Like it's just the small little things. Put it in. I don't know what that is, but put it in a PDF. That drives me crazy. And professional dress, like that is a lost art. Particularly as we've been going through hiring, and I had one young lady, and very smart, went to American University. George, you know, George Washington, like really great. But as soon as I picked up Zoom, I was like, is she wearing sweats? And I'm like, I was like, she is definitely wearing sweats. And it just threw me off the whole interview.
Right.
And I
Wow.
get that we are, you know,
Quarantine.
yeah, we're quarantined. I totally get that. But I need you to get professionally dressed for this. And I even noticed that when I was interviewing before, and I don't know if it's because of the industry we're in, but I have a real clear, like, if you need our program, you can't work our program. We are teaching young people professional skills. Like, you can't work here if you need the program. So I need you to be professional. And again, we're
Right.
working with young people. And then the simple art of just being prepared. Like, you should ask, there's an easy way when you're interviewing to show the interviewer that you've done your research. And so coming prepared with questions at the end. And so not asking, like I had someone ask, you know, do you do tuition reimbursement? I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I'm like, we're on for the very first interview, you have not asked anything about myself as an interview, anything about the job. And it's like, you're more concerned about what you can get out of the job rather than the value you can add in the job.
Right.
And so I think that's a huge, like, missed opportunity when you have an opportunity to ask questions to an interviewer and you focus it more on like what you can get out of it. So the professional dress and thank you note, like that is a lost art. Like I don't know what happened to writing a thank you. So even if it's an email and
Right.
reiterating in that email your skill set, it's not just to say, oh, thank you for the job, but it's reiterating why you want that job. And if there was anything during the interview that you felt like you didn't address, you address it in that, you know, in that thank you. So, and it shows follow through, and it shows that you want the job. It's just not just, we're not just another, you know, opportunity that you're trying to get. But I would definitely say the professionalism, and this may not be popular, I'm going to say, but like also not riding on the fact that you're black, that you're just black. Like, that's great. I like that you're a black candidate. I think that's amazing. But you also need to have skills, right, for this job. And so it's like, because you don't want to get further in your career and realize that you just got a job because you were black. And then you get 5-10 years in your career and you realize that you haven't learned anything. You don't have any skill set. Like, you don't want to be that you're charismatic, you're smart, you get along with people, you're not threatening, but like also like, what value are you adding to this organization? And one thing I see a lot, like I used to do informational interviews with a lot of like, you know, friends who were in my network, but I never saw like, guess what I'm saying is like, like network. Like, it's so important to build your network and have relationships. And I don't want to be preachy, but particularly like I've had friends like, oh, can you meet with this young person? And I meet with this young person and you have no questions for me. You're just like, you're not prepared. Like, you are wasting people's time. Like, like be prepared. I just feel like as young professionals, I don't know where you learn. I don't know where there is a place. This is why I love what you guys do, because I don't know where you learn those small, like soft skills. But I find that also like people who are not of color, often white people, like they are often way more prepared for these interviews. Like, you can tell they practice, they've done a thank you, or maybe they know someone who knows someone. So that person sends me an interview or sends me like, oh, I know you interviewed so-and-so, just letting you know. But I just see just a lack of preparedness and just those small soft skills that just aren't there.
Yeah. A couple of things, and you are so spot on about the relationships, but you mentioned you have a mentor, and we definitely talk about mentoring. Brian and I always talking about mentoring. I got a mentor that changed my life. I started getting promoted so fast after I got this mentor. And it was exactly what we were saying. Back in the days, we had beards. He said, you're scaring people. And he would simply take off, you know, hey, I'm in quarantine now. But he gave us the dance. And for people of color, we don't know. Now, I'm talking to you, you're a vice president. I can say, I cannot name off 20 vice presidents of color right now. And I've been around for a long time.
Amazing.
That's how rare it is to have somebody to speak to what's needed. As a woman who is an executive and a person of color, you mentoring somebody way more powerful. For instance, the person that Brian talks to about dress, you can say some things as a female he can't say.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I had to do it.
Exactly. You know,
you can say them in a way. There ain't no lawsuit. It's just straight down. It is, and we've got to do that, which is why, you know, we do what we do. But we've got to be the place where somebody goes, man, nobody ever told me about that. Nobody. The dress is incredible. Try this. I tell people do this. Go on an airplane. It'll be a minute, because right now I'm gonna look like I got I'm gonna look like I'm taking radioactive disease. Make no airplane, but go on an airplane and dress professionally, and then go on an airplane and sweat to tell me how you get treated.
Oh yeah. Well,
It's not even the same. So the value that you're bringing, and I so applaud what you're doing, is you're teaching them, but you're also showing them by example what can be done. And that's a divine hand from my perspective.
Right. I think, and I think this will be the last point, and then we'll get into our final thoughts. But, you know, you were talking about just where do they learn that professionalism? And I think for us, right, we need to create more spaces for that to happen. You know, I mean, even in my own experience with my own teenager, right, where, you know, he's going out to interviews and we're like, maybe you shouldn't Right. And it's you know, and at some ages, you know, there's a innocent ignorance
Yes.
to the importance of it, right?
Yes.
Because they just don't know,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
They don't know the importance and value of it just yet.
Right.
And but I think we all do, those of us who are in these professional spaces, like yourself, like us with the podcast and things like that, we probably need to band together more often
I
to
agree.
create more things, to create more tools, to be able to get to the masses easier, right? To
Hmm.
get to our people easier to learn these things.
Hmm.
You referenced how some of our white counterparts seem to be fully prepared, like somebody gave them the answers to the test before they walked in the door.
They
Yeah.
did.
Right, and that's what I'm
They
saying.
did.
And I think that's the difference, but it goes back to something you said way early in the interview, Stephanie, where you mentioned a lot of people, not just the kids you're working with, but even myself growing up, right? I grew up in rural Mississippi. There were not many, excuse me, there are not many um, professional images for me to reference
Hmm.
back then. So
Right.
my proximity to those positive professional images was very few and far in between. Now, luckily, like just like yourself, my mother ended up working in those spaces, so I learned a lot there. But I have friends that I grew up with that weren't that fortunate. You know what I mean? And so I think that we're getting there, but I
Yeah.
think there's probably a lot more that we can do to kind of be able to flood some of these communities, some of our in our own households and things like that, to flood more positive professional images,
I agree.
so that so that there's so that they have that reference to lean on, like white counterparts. We're years behind, and that's just what it boils down to.
Mhm. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's the lack of exposure. Like
Yeah,
you just don't know what you don't
you
know.
don't know what you don't
Yeah,
know.
but no, it's funny because after one of the interviews, I was talking to Danielle, and like I feel like I probably am harder on young people of color when they do interview. I probably am. But it's also because like I'm fighting for you. Like I
Exactly.
want you to like I'm trying to hire you. Like I want you to have it. But
Right.
like I also need you to meet me halfway. Like
Yeah.
like I want you to do your research. I want you to be prepared. But at the same time, yeah, how do we create spaces where
Yeah.
you are teaching this to young professionals? Because it's just
Well, that sounds like a follow up note to me. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So whether it's online courses, whether it's
yeah.
once we're able to kind of
Mhm.
meet and socialize person to person again, whether it's traveling back and forth to various places. I know one of the things that Eric and I have always had as a mission for this podcast is something, a goal that we want to do, is to get into some of these colleges and talk to these juniors and seniors who are about to get into the workforce ahead of time, and try to share some of these concepts and principles, and just kind of build the relationships there as well. So that's still something we want to do too.
Yeah, awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, so quick recap. Here's what we learned from our interview with Stephanie. Focus on adding value to your organization, and not so much on what you can get out of the organization. I think that's a great point. You know, finding ways to have more exposure to positive images, finding ways to increase the proximity of positive professional images for even yourself as an adult who's
Hmm.
working in these corporate spaces, but also as the young people are coming up out of college and getting into the workforce as well. Um, Spirituality is a huge part of Stephanie's success, and she's leaned on it a lot, and it's something we talk about on this show oftentimes too. No matter what your belief set is, we talk about it all, because everybody needs something larger than themselves to kind of push towards. It kind of keeps us out of that selfish zone as much as possible. um don't focus so much on others' perception of you. That's something that I think comes over time, well, with experience and kind of learning to eat the constructive criticism, and to listen to those that kind of tell you. Um, and then also when it comes to just some of the things that she's experienced with just the interview process in young professionals, finding a way to increase the professionalism, improve the professionalism, whether it be your attire, whether it be learning how to follow up, whether it be the different types of files that you're sending for interviews and references and such like that. We learned a lot. This is pretty fun. This is pretty fun.
And by the way, can we steal you when we're able to do our stand-up conferences face to face?
Oh yes, I would love to do that.
All good. All good. All good. All right, so we'd like to end the show with like a final thought. It's just a little tidbit just to wrap up the show, whether it be suggested reading or another podcast that you heard, or maybe something somebody told you that just kind of stuck with you that you want to share for people to go throughout the week. But we'll start with our guest, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you. For me, I always say success is a journey. So you never just arrive there. And you know, the word of God talks about like how your gifts will make room for you and bring you before great men. So focus on cultivating and growing your gifts. I think that's a big one. And yeah, like I think in terms of like, I talked about like suggested readings and stuff. I mean, prayer is like number one, reading your word, knowing the promises of God. But another good book is Strength Finders. That's a really good one that focuses on, it mainly talks about focusing more on your strengths. What are your top talents? Assessing like where you fit in an organization. That's a really good one. Difficult Conversations is another good one. And then the first 90 days. So folks who are first starting out a job, like that's a really
best books out there.
Absolutely.
That's a really good one. But no, like, thank you guys. Like, really appreciate this opportunity. And like, just my mom always says, good, better, best. Never let us rest till our good is our better and our better is our best. So always just focus on like being your best and growing professionally. And didn't get to talk a lot about this, but I mean, I know Eric, you said mentorship. That's a big thing. And like, I have two different mentors who focus on two different, you know, things, areas of my life. So I think mentorships and respecting those mentors as well. If they send you meet with someone, be prepared, have questions to be prepared. But thank you guys so much.
Awesome.
Trust me, you'll be back on more than a few times.
I see the conference. I'm gonna just say I'm
ready.
Conference, you gotta do that.
All right, E, what you got? Final thought.
We talked about The Elephant. There's a book out called Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Bradbury and Graves. It is a killer book. Now, if you can't read, it's okay because it's on Audible. But it's worth you putting it on. Now, I'm not dogging nobody because, you know, I heard my grandson use the word supplication in prayer Friday night. And he's 6. I'm listening to him. I ain't never used that word, supplication. I didn't ask for some stuff, but I didn't supplication. Get emotional intelligence. Let it play in your head, because I don't care if you're black, white, or green. You need to understand when you walk in a room, your people radar needs to be up. Right. So excellent book for all of us.
My final thought kind of goes to something that I kind of mentioned earlier in the show, where I was talking about stoicism and just managing your negative emotions. I know I was just heard, we were on a marriage conference yesterday, and you know, and I've been kind of hearing stories about how, you know, through this quarantine, man, relationships are starting to take a turn.
One way or the other.
To the left. You know what I mean? But I think just the concepts of just stoicism and trying to manage, trying to not allow the negative emotions, trying to have as few interactions with your negative emotions as possible, and not letting them control you is a concept that everyone needs to practice. And then in terms of suggested reading, there's a audio book that I'm listening to right now. Because I got to multitask. I got to listen and work at the same time often.
Yeah.
But audiobook is called Atomic Habits. And let's see if I can get a picture of it.
Get out.
Yeah. But it's Atomic Habits by James Clear. And what he talks about there is just that whole concept of making tiny adjustments to your habits to reach the bigger thing. And it's a concept that we all know, but he addresses how you actually practice it, because the hard thing for us is we get so discouraged when the big change does not come as fast as we want
Oh
it.
yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And that's something I've struggled with for my whole life. So I've been kind of pressing through that one, and it's pretty good so far. I'm about 4 or 5 chapters in.
Awesome. That looks good.
All right. So peeps, you guys know where to catch us. You know, we're back on a regular schedule. We come out Thursdays. Toying with playing around with the days and probably putting out a little more content if we can do so. But right now we're still on our weekly Thursday release. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at This Is BTC. As always, if you have questions, you want to follow up, got any follow-up questions from this interview, our interview with Stephanie, or you want to share some quarantine stories, you want to share some stories about you cursing out your boss remotely, hey, we're here for it. You can hit us at the email podbtc@gmail.com. And as always, y'all stay safe, and we'll catch y'all next week.